Benjamin Franklin's famous adage, time is money, equates time to money as a scarce resource. Like money, time can be saved, budgeted, wasted, and spent. Although a considerable amount of research in the fields of marketing and psychology focuses on money, dealing with questions of price, willingness to pay, materialism, and wealth, and although searches on Google reveal consumers to be similarly absorbed with money, recent research argues for a shift in attention toward time by showing the positive downstream consequences of thinking about time rather than money. This work does not examine the effect of having money or having time, but instead the arguably broader and more controllable impact of merely thinking about one resource versus the other. A study demonstrated that directing attention to time instead of money increases individuals' happiness. This effect was shown among typical Americans and low-income Americans planning their days, and among cafe patrons visiting a local coffee shop. In this latter experiment, people entering a cafe were asked to take part in a questionnaire that involved unscrambling a series of sentences that surreptitiously exposed them to time-related words, money-related words, or only neutral words. Unbeknownst to them, these participants were then observed to see how they spent their time in the cafe, and when exiting the cafe, were asked to complete a second questionnaire about how happy and satisfied they felt. Those who had been primed with time upon entering the cafe spent a greater proportion of their time socializing and left happier, whereas people who had been primed with money spent more time with their noses buried in books and left less happy. So, even though focusing on money motivates people to work more, passing the hours working does not translate into greater happiness. Spending time with loved ones does, and a shift in attention toward time proves an effective means to motivate this happy behavior. Another study later tested how focusing on time versus money influences morality, and in so doing provided insight into the mechanism underlying the positive effect of thinking about time on happiness. Whereas thinking about money makes people more likely to cheat, thinking about time makes people less likely to cheat, which happens because thinking about time pushes people to reflect more on themselves. The researchers showed this through both the mediating role of self-reflection and the presence of a mirror, which elicited the same effect as priming time. Thus, drawing attention to time seems to nudge people to consider their time in life as ultimately finite, which encourages them to act in ways they can be happy with when holding up this figurative mirror to who they are. The self-reflecting quality of time also impacts the happiness consumers enjoy from their products. Activating the concept of time leads consumers to be both more likely to purchase and more likely to enjoy products than when the concept of money is activated. A study demonstrated this effect among customers purchasing a cup of lemonade from a lemonade stand, university students thinking about their iPods, restaurant patrons asked about eating out, and typical consumers evaluating their cars. As an example, students first asked how much time they had spent on their iPod, liked their iPod significantly more than students who were first asked how much money they had spent on their iPod. This was because thinking about their temporal investment made the students feel that the product said more about who they are than did thinking about their financial investment. The benefits of directing consumers' attention to time rather than money have also been documented in the context of charitable giving. Because thinking about giving time to a charitable cause evokes greater happiness than thinking about giving money to that cause, donation solicitations that first ask for time produce greater donations, both in the form of time and money. Not only can thinking about the broad construct of time influence happiness, but so can the way people think about time. In particular, how much time people feel like they have left in life and their associated appreciation of the present moment influence how happiness is experienced. A study analyzed the emotions expressed on millions of personal blogs in order to understand how people experience feeling happy. This analysis, along with a series of laboratory experiments and surveys, identified two primary forms of happiness, one associated with feeling excited and the other associated with feeling calm. Moreover, through using the blogger's profile information, the researchers could examine who was expressing each type of happiness and identified a gradual, age-based shift such that people in their teens and 20s were more likely to experience happiness as excitement, but as people got older, they became more likely to experience happiness as calm. These researchers subsequently dug into the psychology underlying this shift and examined how it plays out to influence the choices consumers make. They concluded that because younger people typically have a longer future ahead of them, the more future-oriented emotion of excitement tends to feel more positive in its alignment with these youngsters' eagerness for that future. However, as people get older, their future and calm starts to feel more positive in its alignment with these more mature adults' appreciation of the present moment. Therefore, in pursuit of products that will make them feel happy, younger consumers are more likely to choose exciting options, whereas older consumers are more likely to choose calming options. Notably, an individual's temporal orientation toward the future or present can be manipulated such that young people can instead pursue and experience happiness from calm, and older people can instead pursue and experience happiness from excitement. This means that although the way people experience happiness is dynamic and naturally shifts over the course of life, it is also malleable. Furthermore, whether people experience happiness more from excitement or calm plays into the choices they make, such as the music they listen to, the type of tea they drink, and the brand of water they buy. Even though young people generally view the remainder of their lives to be relatively long, when asked the question, "Is life short or long?" the majority of people answer that life is short. They also tend to believe that life is hard rather than easy, which puts the majority of people in agreement with Hobbes's view of life as nasty, brutish, and short. A study tested whether such a philosophy of life relates to happiness. They asked people two binary choice questions: is life short or long? And is life easy or hard? And measured their happiness. The results revealed that holding the short, hard philosophy is associated with less happiness compared to a long, easy philosophy. Another study investigated a philosophy proposed by Rabbi Hyman Schachtel in 1954. Happiness is not having what you want, but wanting what you have. To test this maxim, the researchers asked people whether or not they had, and the extent to which they wanted, 52 material items. This allowed the researchers to quantify how much their participants wanted what they had and how much they had what they wanted. The results showed that both variables had distinct and positive effects on happiness, and wanting what you have helps explain the positive effect of gratitude on happiness. Together, these findings suggest that focusing on the broad notion of time increases happiness, and that thinking about time in a particular way can influence not only how much happiness people feel, but also how they experience happiness. Spending time. How does spending time influence happiness? And are there particular ways of spending time that produce greater happiness? A group of papers examining the former showed that investing time in product creation can increase how happy consumers subsequently are with that product. Some studies uncovered what they called the IKEA effect. Their findings showed that individuals who built IKEA boxes, folded origami frogs, or constructed sets of Legos were willing to pay more for their finished product than were individuals who had been presented with these same products already assembled by an expert. Whether a self-proclaimed do-it-yourselfer or not, it turns out that spending time to successfully assemble a product makes people feel competent and accomplished. The sense of accomplishment tied to these self-assembled products drives people's value for the products. A similar "I designed it myself" effect shows that the benefits of product assembly also pertain to product design. Individuals who designed their own t-shirt or set of skis were willing to pay more for these products than individuals presented with off-the-shelf versions of these products. This may not initially seem all that surprising, since designing one's own t-shirt allows consumers to customize their shirts to fit their individual tastes. However, the researchers showed that participants were willing to pay more for a t-shirt that they had designed themselves, even when it looked exactly the same as the off-the-shelf version. As with the IKEA effect, an increased sense of accomplishment played an underlying role. In both cases, investing time into a product provides feelings of accomplishment, which afford consumers greater happiness from these products. A more recent study noticed that such benefits may be specific to cases in which design and assembly are combined. When consumers are tasked with designing and assembling their products, but these activities are separated, the time that consumers are required to spend becomes onerous. In related work, a study showed that customization of products is particularly positive when the product is intended as a gift for someone else. In a study among women tasked with designing a tote bag either for herself or for a friend using a real customization website, the researchers found that the women who created their tote bag as a gift were willing to pay significantly more than those who created their tote bag for themselves. Both the IKEA effect and the I designed it myself effect were driven by an increased sense of accomplishment from spending time on a product. This happiness from doing may be tapping into something even more fundamental. A study found that although people tend to choose to remain idle, busy people are happier than their idle counterparts. The researchers found across 2 studies that among college students who had a spare 15 minutes between 2 surveys, those who spent the time walking to deliver their first survey to a faraway location felt happier than those who delivered their first survey to a nearby location and idly waited for the next survey to begin. A study also noted that despite people's inclination not to exert themselves in their temporal expenditures, doing so can have surprisingly positive ramifications. In particular, although time-constrained people tend to be stingy with their time, if they were to instead give some of their time away, they might feel less constrained by time. 4 experiments showed that individuals who spent between 5 and 30 minutes on someone else subsequently felt as though they had more time than did individuals who had wasted that time, spent that time on themselves, or received that time as a windfall. One study, for instance, asked participants to recall a recent expenditure of time that was either for someone else or for themselves. The researchers then asked these individuals how much time they felt like they had and how that expenditure made them feel. The results indicated that although giving time made participants feel more connected to others, it was actually their increased sense of efficacy that was responsible for the positive effect on time affluence. Spending time to help others makes people feel as though they have accomplished more within a given amount of time, such that they can do more with their time in general. This makes time seem more expansive. Therefore, when feeling time constrained, people should become more generous with their time, despite their inclinations to be less so. While these papers speak to the potential happiness that can come from investing one's time into products and other people, there is also work that has looked at whether there are temporal expenditures that tend to be happier in and of themselves. Do some experiences tend to be happier than others? A study found that even though staying at a freezing ice hotel or eating such a peculiar food as bacon ice cream may not be particularly pleasant in the moment, people are motivated to collect unusual and extreme experiences in an effort to build their experiential CV. Additionally, a study found that people are motivated to protect their special experiences by not repeating them. Another study examined the happiness derived from different types of experiences more directly. They compared the happiness associated with extraordinary experiences and ordinary experiences. The study measured the happiness produced by over 1,800 self-reported experiences that people recalled, imagined, or posted on Facebook, and found that the amount of happiness enjoyed from ordinary and extraordinary experiences depended on people's age, more specifically, how much time they felt they had left in life. Whereas younger people enjoyed greater happiness from extraordinary experiences, ordinary experiences became increasingly associated with happiness as people got older, such that ordinary experiences produced as much happiness as extraordinary experiences when people felt they had limited time remaining. An exploration into the multiple factors that might explain this age-based effect produced evidence for the underlying role of self-definition. Irrespective of age, self-defining experiences produce greater happiness, but the type of experiences people use to define themselves seems to change with age. Whereas extraordinary experiences are particularly self-defining for young people, older people are more likely to define themselves using the ordinary things that fill their daily lives. By measuring people's happiness immediately before and after their attendance of religious services and going to the gym, a study also noted the potential happiness from frequent, ordinary experiences. They found not only that people were happier exiting the experience than entering it, but the frequency with which people engaged in these experiences was positively related to their overall happiness. Through frequent positive boosts, these seemingly minor experiences promise a long-lasting impact on happiness. A study proposed 5 principles of happy ways to spend time to complement principles of happy ways to spend money. These principles include spending time on the right activities, expanding your time, and being aware that happiness changes over time.